Hi, my name is Felipa, and today is day 79 of reading this big Bible. And then around 180 pages or so, I will officially be halfway through. So a bit more to go. So in here it says we have Amaziah's good reign over Judah. In the second year of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, reigned Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah. And he walked well in the ways of the Lord. And then we have that Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, essentially like, let's go toe to toe. And Jehoash said, we don't need to do this. And then they did go toe to toe. And it says that Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, and came to Jerusalem and broke down the gate and took all their gold and silver. So that was kind of like a little battle that happened. Then it goes into Jeroboam II succeeds Jehoash in Israel, and how Jehoash ended up passing away, and Jeroboam, his son, reigned in his stead. And then at the end here, saying that Amaziah ended up essentially escaping to Lachish, but they found him there, they killed him. And it says, and all the people of Judah took Azariah, which was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. So we've got this Jeroboam and this Azariah. And so then Azariah is, of course, reigning evil. Kind of the same story repeats itself. Azariah has a good reign, but continuing through all these little sections, it does have a pattern saying, save that the high places were not removed. The people sacrificed and burnt incense still on the high places. So essentially, like, people are still kind of doing their thing, believing in a different God and not following in God's way. And then in this little section here, I won't go into too much detail just because it's quite a lot of generations of kings serving throughout Israel and whatnot. Even starts here, it says, in the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, did Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, reign over Israel and Samaria for 6 months. And it goes on and on like that, talking about all these different kings and rulers and how they did good and bad and whatnot. And then we go here where it says, in the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, began Jotham, the son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, to reign. And then in the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. There is a fight between Rezin and Pekah. And then we have down here, Ahaz sends the pattern of an altar in Damascus to Urijah. And so this is King Ahaz who went to Damascus. He saw the altar there. He wants it fashioned exactly how he sees it. And so it says that he did some burnt offerings and whatnot, but he ended up kind of not even revamping, but kind of altering the house of the Lord that was built back in those other previous chapters. And it actually says that he spoils the temple because he takes off parts that were originally on there, and he converts. It says, in the covert for the Shabbat that they had built in the house in the king's entry without turned he from the house of the Lord for the king of Assyria. So he's turning everything into his own kind of like temple for his own purpose, which is obviously not right. And then here we says, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did evil. And now we start to see a little bit more of like instruction or a bit more of God's word, saying that the children of Israel kept sinning so much against the Lord that they walked in the statues of the heathen and did burnt offerings and sacrificed and obeyed all these other gods that were not God himself. And God is essentially saying, I told you not to do this. I told you not to serve these idols. The Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers. And through them, he was telling the people of Israel this message saying, turn ye from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes according to all the law which I commanded your fathers and which I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but they hardened their necks like to the neck of their fathers, and did not believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes. They made covenants he made with their father. They rejected the covenants he made with their fathers. And it says here, they followed in vanity. They became vain. They went after the heathen that God told them not to go towards. And they melted images and worshipped Baal and all this stuff. So God's really, really angry. And it says he removes Israel out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah, but also saying that Judah also did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel, which they made. And so it says, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. So Israel's literally like the people are dispersed, killed, sacrificed, killed, taken away, as bondmen, as servants. Like God's really not caring because they keep sinning. And so the people of Israel are actually carried out of the very land that God promised them because of their own actions. And then this section here is really interesting too, because it says foreign nations transplanted in Samaria make a mixture of religions, and how the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and Cuttah and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And so they brought their own religions, their own gods. God was, of course, angry that, his own land that he promised the people of Israel is now infiltrated, this promised land. And so he sends a bunch of lions to go and kill them. And of course, not all the people are killed by the lions. But then the king of Assyria says, go and bring one of the priests, essentially one of the priests who we kicked out of here, and get him to teach you the ways of the Lord of this land. Get him to teach you the way of the God of this land, so that you can abide by him, so that you don't get hurt, that you don't get killed, that you're obeying the Lord. And so unfortunately, all of these individuals are now seeming to think that there is more than one God. And this essentially became like a game of telephone. You have one God who started at the very beginning of time, who created the whole thing, who is the being in and of itself, the essence. And now throughout history and throughout all these nations, unfortunately, this game of telephone happens, and people are creating their own gods and their own rules and their own sacrifices and their own rituals. And the purity of what faith was supposed to be has now been highly diluted and skewed. And so this priest comes out and he teaches them, essentially how they should fear the Lord. But then it goes on to say, howbeit, every nation made gods of their own and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made Succoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibzah and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire of Dramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. So they feared the Lord and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared the Lord and served their own gods after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their own statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. So all these new nations are coming into the land of Israel. They're creating their own gods. Then they bring in a prophet from, an Israeli prophet and they say, teach us the way of your God so that he's not punishing us. But then they're not even following that. And so this just shows you how skewed the human mind is, or human nature is, in terms of following blindly kind of anything that they're told. And so from having their own religion to being told and educated about the God of this nation, which isn't just of Israel, it's the God of the whole world, but they're seeming to think he's only the God of this particular piece of land. And then they go and they create all these other gods and each kind of faction, like Babylon and Cuth and all that, each one of them makes a completely different God. And so the purity of what faith meant and spirituality and following in the commandment of the one true God has completely been eroded. And also to here it says, so they feared this one Lord, but then they go and they create these other gods that they serve. And they also appoint priests, who are the lowest of, essentially the lowest of the type of person who should be placed in the role of being a priest, and then they place them into the houses of the highest places. So places of worship and places of faith, and the Lord's house is supposed to be like the highest, most purest space there is, and they're appointing people who are not credible, people who are not appropriate for these roles, people who are not fit to be a priest. And then it just ends on this part basically saying, so they continue to do whatever they want, essentially. They don't fear the Lord, and they don't even follow their own statutes. They don't follow their own ordinances. They don't follow their own law or commandments. So people are just kind of, creating these new arbitrary rules and accordances, and then kind of doing whatever they see fit, and they're not abiding by the original statutes and commandments that God made for them. And so that's how this little section ends. Just basically God saying, I brought you out of Egypt, and you're supposed to worship me and sacrifice and follow statutes and ordinances and law and commandments and observe to do it forever. And most of all, you should not fear other gods. You should fear me, but you should not fear, but the Lord your God ye shall fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. So essentially, like, I'm your God. You should fear me if you're not abiding by me, but you shouldn't fear all these other false gods, because I have your back. I will protect you. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. And this is where we end this section. It's chapter 17, verse 41. And it says, so these nations feared the Lord and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers. So do they unto this day. So I'm not sure where we're going to go from here, but essentially Israel is essentially kind of like out of Israel. The people have dispersed. There's new foreign nations. There's a mixture of religions. There's new gods being introduced. And so the purity of God and his word and his presence has been diluted and or forgotten. So it'll be interesting to see who comes through these stories as the continuing voice and vessel of the Lord to try to lead people in the right way, in the way of the Lord once again. So tomorrow's day 80, and I will let you know what I learned. If you have any answers or questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Thank you for listening.